Every 7 years, you're a new person because all your cells have changed, right? And so what is regenerative medicine? It's basically rebooting the body's original design for healing. Basically, our genes are mismatched for the modern environment. We didn't evolve to sit in chairs all day. We didn't evolve to be indoors all day. We didn't evolve to eat processed foods. It's called evolutionary mismatch. You can do all the peptides and stem cells in the world. If you haven't built that foundation, then those things will not be as effective. Because at the end of the day, they're working on your cellular terrain. Meaning if the terrain is all distorted and the body has all these toxins or it's all dysregulated, then those signals can't do what they're supposed to. There's this peptide called SF31 that can basically think of it as the mechanic, helps you repair your mitochondria. But the underlying principle is the same, which is basically how do we get your body to heal itself?
Is longevity for the rich? Hi, I'm Gayu Lewis, a board-certified integrative nutrition, health and menopause coach and the host of the Gayu Lewis Podcast. This is the space where we talk what's happening behind our hormones, from science to mindset to everyday stories that help women thrive through midlife. Today's conversation is a fascinating one because we are stepping into the future of medicine. My guest today is Dr. Adeel Khan, a Canadian board-certified physician and one of the leading voices in regenerative medicine, known for his work with stem cells, peptides, and advanced therapies that support recovery, longevity, and cellular health. His work has attracted global attention with high-profile clients including Chris Hemsworth, Zac Efron, Tony Robbins, and even the Kardashians, who have explored regenerative therapies to optimize performance and recovery. Today, we are diving into the science behind stem cells, peptides, longevity, and what the future of healthcare might look like. Doctor, regenerative medicine, peptides, stem cells, now these are words that are suddenly getting very popular, right? But for a layman who doesn't really understand what these are, can you explain what they need to understand about all of this?
Yeah, I think what people need to understand first is what is regenerative medicine, and is basically rebooting the body's original design for healing. So what that means is that your body has this natural ability to heal,
Yep.
right? And the easiest example I can give people, especially people who understand Ayurvedic medicine or historical like Indian medicine, is fasting, right? When you fast, what happens? Your body has something called autophagy, which is your body's natural repair mechanism to repair damaged cells. And so your body clearly has a way to heal itself. It's very intuitive to, I think, almost anyone that if you get a cut on your hand, it can regenerate and heal, right? So it's just unlocking that code that your body has and figuring out what that code is. And stem cells, peptides, and some of the stuff you mentioned are tools to do that. But the underlying principle is the same, which is basically how do we get your body to heal itself?
So this basically has been existing for decades now. Have people...
Well, centuries, potentially.
Yeah.
It wasn't called, I mean, if you look at some of the historical mythology too, people used to talk about, this phoenix and all these things in terms of like regeneration and like, so there's always been I think, from a humanity perspective, just an interest in like regeneration and healing.
Yeah, but it's getting more popular now, like especially with the word longevity.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why I'm saying, but everyone gets confused because social media has a lot of noise around it. That's why I said, maybe just to understand from a basic, but as we age, does the body's mechanism of coping with, inflammation reduce, or it's the same and then we kind of playing with it?
Yeah, I mean, what happens as you age is your body's ability to maintain homeostasis is what weans. So what that means is your body can't maintain the balance. Your body's all about balance. And we have 30 trillion plus cells in the body, right? So there's trillions of cells all the time that are constantly self-destructing, that are constantly adapting to the environment. There's a saying, right? Every 7 years, you're a new person because all your cells have changed, right?
Yeah.
And so basically what's happening is there's this constant renewal process. And over time, the body's homeostasis shifts towards it can't maintain that balance as much. And the reason for that is there's multiple factors, but one of the biggest drivers is just what's called epigenetic drift, which is basically a way to say that the instructions that the genes have get blurred. Okay. So if you think of what the genetic code is, it's like an instruction manual to guide your cells on what to do, right? And so, but over time, those instructions get blurred. And your cells that are the factories that make the proteins, they start making mistakes and they start getting all these misfolded proteins, and then that leads to dysfunction, right? The cellular dysfunction is ultimately what leads to these misfolded proteins, and if we can make that cell function better again, that's kind of what we're trying to focus on with regenerative medicine. But to come back to your question, essentially what's happening with the inflammation is that the cells that are responsible for maintaining inflammation start to forget how to do their job properly.
Okay.
And so these instructions are getting blurred. And because of that, then your body starts skewing towards more of an inflammatory state. And there's a lot of science we could unpack, but without getting too technical, that's basically the gist of it.
Okay. So you're saying that they are basically get a wrong message, or
Yes.
what they were thought is getting older. And is that through peptides or stem cell therapy that we rework and give them the right coding?
Exactly. So what is a peptide? It's a short chain of amino acids, which basically means a baby protein that sends a signal, right, to your body. And that signal can help to restore cell function potentially. But it's also a very transient or temporary signal. And maybe that signal isn't strong enough. So maybe you need something stronger. And stem cells are the raw building blocks in your body to build new tissue. They're able to create what's called self-renewal, which means they can regenerate and repair and divide and also turn into any tissue in your body.
Okay.
This is specifically what's called a pluripotent stem cell, because there's different types of stem cells, right? And that's one of the big things I've been trying to educate people on. Not all stem cells are the same, right? Some are harmful, some aren't very useful. Most clinics, the ones they offer are called mesenchymal stem cells, MSCs for short, and they're not actually that great. Most of them die in the body. So we use something called mu cells, MUSE, which is able to turn to any cell in your body. But importantly, what they can do is they can make those cells that are dysfunctional functional again.
Okay.
And the way they do that is they have a few very interesting mechanisms. But one of the ways is if they find a damaged cell, they home in on it. So they have a homing mechanism.
Okay.
And they eat the damaged cell. And then they turn into that new cell. So for example, let's say you do an IV, you've had a heart attack recently, they're going to go to your heart. They're going to find that tissue damage, they're going to home in on it, and then they'll eat some of the damaged heart cell fragments, and now they're going to use the cellular machinery to know what to do, but now they're functionally younger and work better.
Oh, that's very interesting. I think your field of the science is very interesting. But what got you into this field of regenerative medicine?
Well, it started because I was always into fitness and health, and that naturally came because a lot of my family members had diabetes, high blood pressure, and I was kind of like, why is that? And then I really, looking into it, it seemed like it was all lifestyle related, right? It's about what you eat, especially in South Asian community. We don't tend to have the best diets and not the best lifestyle. And so I got into it at a young age because I didn't want to have those issues, number one. And I wanted to also help my family members. And so I was always into preventative medicine. And then from there, naturally, it kind of evolved where it's like, okay, if I want to treat the root cause, then I have to look at what's called systems biology. How does the body work as a system, as opposed to being like, oh, you have your stomach, you have your brain, you have your heart. It's a system that's integrated, right? And this is about chronic disease and longevity, right? Because they're all intertwined. Of course, if you have a fracture or something, right, you need to go to the hospital and get that fixed by an orthopedic surgeon. But that's very different from chronic diseases and aging, right? And so essentially because of that, my natural curiosity in understanding how to prevent disease drove me to the root cause medicine. And that got me really fascinated in regenerative medicine, because regenerative medicine was this whole idea that, hey, maybe we can make your body heal on its own. Maybe we don't have to maybe we don't have to do surgery. Maybe we don't have to give you drugs to suppress it. Maybe we can actually get your body to heal and get the tissue back to the way it was. Yeah. So to me, that was just such a cool concept. Obviously, it was in its infancy when I first started, which was about 8 years ago. But now it's still early days, but it's come a long way. And the science is rapidly evolving.
Yeah. Just, talking about, you said about, fasting, intermittent fasting was done decades ago to help the body kind of clean out from an autophagy phase. So do you really need to get into the peptide phase, or can you start doing fasting to help your body automatically?
The best way to get your body to regenerate and heal is lifestyle, right? That's always going to be the foundation. Sleep, stress, exercise, nutrition, community, meaning, purpose, those basic things. Light is another big one, right? Circadian rhythm, even the air we breathe and the toxins. Those are foundational things that you can never ignore. And you can do all the peptides and stem cells in the world, but if you haven't built that foundation, then those things will not be as effective. Because at the end of the day, they're working on your cellular terrain, meaning if the terrain is all distorted and your body has all these toxins or it's all dysregulated, then those signals can't do what they're supposed to. So you have to set the body to be in a prepared or optimized state first. which is why, we work with a more holistic approach, because that's just how the body is designed.
Yeah. It kind of leads me to, I was just thinking about this, generally when people talk about longevity, you find the so-called biohackers, bros, that's what we call them, who are into understanding this better, because people even now prefer, anything that is a pill, which is an easier solution. Is regenerative medicine again on the easier side? Because like you said, you just training your body or tuning your body to do what it's supposed to do.
Exactly.
Right? So is it similar? I'm sure, of course, it's not similar to modern medicine where you take a pill and you suppress the symptom. You're actually looking at the root cause of why this is happening, why is the inflammation in the body. But is it simpler to take a peptide, or you still have to make the lifestyle changes?
Look, everyone wants a shortcut, and everyone wants a pill or a IV like NAD or, peptides to just be the solution for everything. But the reality is those things are not going to replace movement and nutrition, and if your sleep is off, all the stuff that we just talked about. So so the short answer is no, you still need to do the basic stuff. Can you take a shortcut? Yes, perhaps. There are shortcuts that you can do to enhance the effect of the lifestyle, right? Like, let's say you are eating well and you're exercising, you're eating minimally processed foods, you're eating real foods, and you have your sleep dialed in and you're still having a hard time losing weight. Then maybe that's where a peptide could be helpful, right? Okay. Because it can give you a boost, because you've already tried the solid foundational things, but it's not working, and you need something to help you. Similar for chronic diseases or aging, right? Say if you've done all the foundational things, you do supplements, you do the right and you're even doing peptides, but you want to be like, okay, what else can I do for my longevity? Then that's where stem cells come in. I always say, if you look at it from like a pyramid perspective, the base of the pyramid is, of course, like behavioral psychology and compliance and the lifestyle stuff, and then supplements and peptides, and then like stem cells, gene therapy, and the stuff I do. So I'm at the very, very top. So most people don't need me, but they need to. But it's good to understand where science is headed, obviously, and the work that we do. But most people just need to build the foundation, which is obviously the work people like you do. And I think more and more awareness is going into that now.
Okay. You spoke about, you sit right at the top of the pyramid where, the elite people kind of come to you, and you got all the big celebrities who come in. What do they really look for? Do you think they've already managed their lifestyle?
Yeah, look,
and all the levels?
Most of those people have unlimited resources, meaning they can access any doctor. They have as much money as anyone. And so they basically have the capability of maximizing everything in their life already. They've got a health coach, they got a nutritionist, they got everything, right? And so they've already done everything foundationally possible. And so now they're looking for, okay, what's the cutting edge that can give me an advantage or make me slow down aging or perhaps make me perform better? So those are the people I do work with, a lot of those top performers, some of the world's top athletes and some of the big celebrities, because they're looking for that extra competitive advantage potentially for sporting, or just if they're a celebrity, they just want to look better, right? And they just want to slow down, or they want to age as slow as possible, right? So, and we can measure these things and show them that we can actually have a significant impact on that.
Oh, fantastic. Getting into, the whole peptides, you said that they basically, probably protein molecules that are produced by our body anyways, and then now you just substitute or increase their production. Is that what peptides do?
Yeah, I mean, there are some synthetic peptides, which our bodies don't make, and they can still be valuable. But of course, those peptides they become more like a drug, I guess. And peptides are a drug, but like a lot of peptides that are naturally occurring are similar to what our body already has in terms of pathways. And so there's probably less risk with those. With synthetic peptides, obviously, they just have to be more well studied, I think, because it's not something bioidentical to what our body makes. So there's potentially more risk, but there's also synthetic ones that can work very well too.
Okay. And when you do take them, so there's specific ones that work for specific effect that you want in your body?
Yes. Yeah. So let's say you want to have more energy. There's this peptide called SS31 that can basically think of it as the mechanic. It helps to repair your mitochondria.
Okay.
And the mitochondria, to go back to high school biology, is where your body basically makes energy, right? And the energy is obviously what happens as a byproduct of energy production is that you get something called free radicals. And this free radicals start damaging cell membranes and DNA. And this is one of the root drivers of aging. And so if we can keep your mitochondria healthy, we know it can have an impact on aging. And that's why NMN and NAD, creatine, all these things have become very popular, because they all work on the mitochondrial mitochondrial system, but there's peptides that do that as well. So SS31, for example, can help to stabilize an important protein called cardiolipin, which is in part of that, electron transport chain where electrons have to move from one complex to another to make energy. And it can help to stabilize that so that the let's say that output of the mitochondria is better and then or more efficient. And then there's peptides like MOTC, which is another peptide for mitochondrial energy production. So once you've built the foundation, now the mitochondria is working better, then you can increase its output. So the order of operations and knowing how to sequence is important, but it's such a great combination. That's just one example, and there's hundreds of examples of how you can combine peptides for depending on if it's for skin health, for brain health, for joint pain. Like there's so many different protocols out there, right? But this is just a protocol, let's say, for mitochondrial health and energy. And imagine now you can do this protocol and it can help your metabolism to potentially be more effective. So it can help with fat loss, it can help with energy, and it can just make you feel overall better and vitality too. And it can have long-term effects, meaning you do a cycle of it and you can still, even if you're not on it anymore, you can still feel the benefits that are long-lasting.
Okay. How long do they last? That was my next question. Unlike, I know that GLP-1 has now become such a popular medicine that people started taking, but you need to have it every week is what I understand. I had a podcast with an endocrinologist and we had a detailed chat on that. But with peptides, I've read that they have a much longer shelf life. Or process in the body when I say shelf life.
So I hope the endocrinologist, because a lot of them don't say this, but did he say that the biggest issue with GLP-1s is when you lose 1 pound of 1 pound of fat, or 1 pound of body weight, 2/3 is fat and 1/3 is muscle, right? And so that's a big problem because what happens is then a lot of people lose the weight, but they're also losing muscle at the same time. And then now their metabolic reserve and resiliency has decreased. And then once they go off the peptide, then they gain the weight back. A lot of people do gain weight back or gain some weight back. And now you have gained back fat and you don't have as much muscle as before. So you're actually worse off metabolically. So you have to be very careful with these peptides. And I think you have to be really cognizant of getting enough protein and training and getting enough resistance training and potentially using other peptides to negate the effect of the muscle loss. So for example, there's growth hormone peptides or follistatin, which is a peptide for muscle gain that you could use that could potentially mitigate some of the muscle loss. So anyway, but with peptides in general, they do have to be dosed on a daily basis usually. For example, the ones I was talking about, like mitochondrial, usually you would do them on a daily basis for 1 or 2 months at a time. So you wouldn't do them indefinitely. And the reason is because your body can also have a bit of adaptation effect. And it's almost like tolerance kind of, just like you can become tolerant to caffeine. Your body can sort of not have that same efficacy that it did when you first used it. So you need to give your body a break from it so your body can kind of reset and it can work again. So usually you do let's say 1 or 2 months on, you take a 2-3 month break and then you do it again. And again, this is all based off clinical experience because I'm fortunate because I have access to a lot of the top practitioners around the world. And so I've worked with people who've been doing peptides for 20, 25 years.
Oh, wow.
And so I've learned from them, right? But there's not clinical trial data. There's not a lot of clinical trial or human data. So you don't have those guidelines. It's not like you can just be a doctor and just be like, okay, where do I learn about peptides? It's not like there's medical guidelines. There is Peptide University now, and there are platforms out there, but they're all based off expert opinion, not based off randomized clinical trials. Just so people understand, it is still a relatively new thing, and it's not something maybe everyone is doing because they're waiting for more research to be out there too.
Okay. Oh, makes sense. So you're similar to supplements, you're saying even this you cycle so that your body...
Yes.
Otherwise our body is so intelligent, gets used to it and you don't see the difference.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Doctor, who's the right candidate? Who are the right people who should probably take peptide or who are the category of people who should completely avoid it?
Well, because peptides are such a broad category, there's almost a peptide for everyone. So it's kind of like supplements, right? It's who should take supplements, who shouldn't. There's certain supplements for almost everyone that can take, right? If you're not eating enough fish, you need to take omega-3, right? As an example. And with peptides, if you're healthy and you're young, you probably don't need to be on peptides, because yes, there's a lot of people starting to promote them for longevity and things like that. But if you're in your 20s or if you're, even in your 30s and you're very healthy, you're probably not going to have a huge benefit from it. And it's always about risk versus benefit, right? They're safe, but we don't know necessarily the long-term risk because there's not a lot of data, right? And so So it's always about like, okay, in your 20s and 30s, you feel fine and there's no issues. So then why are you going to put something in your body that may have some risk with it and you don't really need it?
Yeah.
But as you get older, then maybe if you're starting to get fatigue, you're starting to get some of the signs of aging, then that's where peptides may be helpful just to combat some of those signs of aging as a tool.
Okay. No, I'm just saying that in case you are, you've been any autoimmune conditions or anything, is there a contraindication?
No, well, that's the thing. There's peptide vaccines for cancer even.
Okay.
So you can use them for cancer, autoimmune. You can use them for any pathological condition. There are pretty much peptide protocols out there. And a lot of these were developed in Russia in the 70s. So,
Okay.
they have decades of research on peptides too, which is often ignored by the Western medical community, unfortunately. And
Yeah.
but the point is that a lot of these peptides can be used in medical diseases.
Mhm.
I think where people use them incorrectly is more where they're healthy and they're young and they don't really have any problems and they just want to use it for longevity. But like there isn't much data showing that these peptides actually do anything for longevity. There's just very basic science, like saying that, oh, maybe it increases telomeres or maybe it reduces inflammation in the gut. But that's mechanistic data. That doesn't translate necessarily into anything concrete in terms of reducing your risk of mortality, which means risk of dying.
Yeah.
Like if you need stronger data measuring, for example, like what are called epigenetic clocks,
Yeah.
or proteomics, which are ways to measure how your body is aging and then see if those peptides actually have an effect on that type of measurement tool, which no one's done yet. And that's something, that we'd like to start studying. But it's also because peptides aren't patented, or like a lot of them are just, like there's just companies just making them now.
Yeah.
Then there isn't a big pharma to kind of support that R&D as well. So a lot of it has to be like a kind of grassroots movement of like, practitioners collecting and sharing their data.
Okay. You spoke about, mortality. Recently, there's a lot of young people. When I say young, people in their 40s to, late 50s, the death rate has increased on that segment, not the older people, but this is your prime age. But there's a lot of mortality rate at this. Why do you think that's increasing?
Yeah, I think I remember reading like there's an increased prevalence of cancer, for example, in autoimmune conditions now happening, and in Gen Z and as well as that age group. So, and that I think almost certainly is related to environmental factors. So, microplastics, the modern environment. It really comes down to, this is the fundamental, most important theory to understand if you want to understand anything about health, and it's called evolutionary mismatch. So basically, our genes are mismatched for the modern environment. So we didn't evolve to sit in chairs all day. We didn't evolve to be indoors all day. We didn't evolve to eat processed foods. This is a mismatch to our genes. So we have to come back to that evolutionary blueprint that we've been given, which is that we need these certain inputs and tools to be as healthy as possible. But in the modern world, that's maybe impossible to be completely ancestral, but at least you have to be mindful of how do we integrate these kind of historical tools that we know work with our bodies. So I think for a lot of people, what they need to do is they need to just get those foundational lifestyle interventions in check, because if you're not doing those things, then you're going to increase your risk of these chronic diseases because you're increasing the aging process, right? Yeah. Aging in and of itself is the biggest risk to chronic diseases, right? That's why as you get older, your risk of autoimmune, cancer, neurodegeneration, cardiovascular, or diabetes, all these things increase as you get older. Yeah. And so because that's just, aging is a foundational driver. And that's why studying aging to me is so fascinating, because if we can treat aging and make people's whole body work better, then we can reduce their risk of chronic diseases.
Yeah. So I understand that, but a lot of people wait for something like a big thing to happen, like a being diagnosed with something
reactive. Yes. Yeah.
And that's when then people are like, oh, it's a wake up call. A lot of people feel it's a wake up call. Some people still go take a pill and then they just work. They don't really make any major difference. But the clients that you see, are this category people, or the ones that want to take a proactive step towards their health?
Yeah, no, I think I'm for the most part seeing like I said, the top of the pyramid. Yeah. So most of those people are wanting to do this stuff because they want to be proactive, or a lot of them do have issues, right? Like they do have chronic diseases, or they have a chronic pain issue and they want to get it resolved. They don't want to just mask it. So they're not interested in just taking medications or pain meds or surgery necessarily. They want to have a definitive solution. And generally, these people want to avoid surgery if they can. So those are the type of people that we see, and often we can help them.
Okay. Doctor, just, kind of moving a little deeper into women specifically. A lot of the medical studies kind of ignore women's health in general because we're a little bit more complicated species in general. But our bodies work so different. And I'm a women's wellness coach, and I specifically work with midlife women going through the whole perimenopause, menopause journey. That's my area of expertise. Are there any peptides or any therapies, alternative therapies that you suggest that can help women, going through the whole hormonal roller coaster, especially during this time, that can help them?
Yeah, I mean, I think with women's health, and the missing piece there, at least that we've seen in our practice, is using what's called functional genomics. And so what that means is looking at how, as a woman, do you metabolize different hormone replacement therapies. So for example, if some people may metabolize androgens or testosterone faster and break it down faster, and other people may break it down slower. Or with estrogen, they may convert it faster or break it down faster. And so this metabolism process is dictated based off your genetics, and that can affect what type of hormone replacement therapy regimen you should be on. Okay. So you need to use those personalized genetics with blood work to be able to really give you a personalized plan to figure out, okay, this is going to be what's going to be the most successful for you. And that's not to say, obviously, traditional HRT can still work, and it does work for many women, but it doesn't work for some women. And the reason for that is because there's a missing piece. So if you want to have the best chance of success from the outlets, then I think using that approach. And that's where we have someone on our team, Dr. Mansoor, who's actually moved to Dubai from Canada as well, funny enough. And then he's a world-class clinical geneticist, and he's specializes in women's health. So that's why we work with him, and he'll optimize the women's hormone and get the cellular terrain ready, like we talked about, and do all that work before. Then we'll do the peptides and stem cells as needed. Okay. So it's about setting the foundation, which often involves looking at your own genetics because everyone's slightly different.
Okay. But any specific peptides that you would recommend if someone is not going through such a, deep dive into their health?
I think, generally, I think the problems for women that, at least with menopause, obviously the two biggest things I see at least are brain fog, so to speak, right? And they start forgetting things and their memory. And then the other one probably being energy as well, right? Yeah. And then difficulty sleeping. So those are some of the issues. And there are peptides for all those different things. So for example, the mitochondrial peptides we talked about earlier, they can be used for energy. There's nasal spray peptides. There's one, for example, called CMAC, which helps to produce more brain-derived neurotropic factor, BDNF, in the brain, which can help with focus and memory. And that's just a nasal spray because it goes, then that way goes to your brain. Not all of it, but some of it. And then there's peptides such as delta sleep-inducing peptide, DSIP, which can help with sleep. So that's just some examples of common issues that women who go through this process would have, and there's peptides for it. So I think you can almost say if you have a problem, there's a peptide for that. Okay. Because there's thousands of peptides now, you know what I mean? So there's almost a peptide for everything.
Oh, makes sense. You spoke about a nasal spray. So it's interesting. I thought the peptides are always intravenous or,
injections.
Injections, yeah. And I'm petrified of injections.
No. So nasal sprays work well too. And there's even the mitochondrial peptides, they have nasal spray versions. And now one of the companies I work with is called Peptual, Peptual. And they actually have patches. Okay. So peptide patches.
Oh,
so
like the HRT patches that we get.
But these are NAD, copper peptide patch, BPC 157 patch. There's different patches that they have, and you just wear them for a day, and then you can just take them off and switch.
Oh, this is...
so it's painless.
Yeah.
And they're just almost as effective as injections.
Okay. Do you need to go to a compounding pharmacy to get them? What does the whole process look like?
Yeah, that's where it becomes a little confusing because it really depends on where you live. For example, here in Dubai, there is a website called UAE Peptides, and you can order directly from them. Yeah. And they deliver to your house, and you can have a consult if you like, but you don't even have to necessarily. My recommendation is to always have a consult and talk to a practitioner who understands peptides, so then they can use your blood work and they can monitor you properly and make sure it's safe and appropriate for you. And then there is a compounding pharmacy route. But what I would say it's just because it's going through a compounding pharmacy doesn't necessarily mean it's safer or more effective. Like maybe say, obviously there's checks and balances, but a lot of times the important thing with peptides is where are they sourcing their raw ingredients? That means the amino acid sequencing, right? When you put a chain of amino acids together, that's how you make a peptide. But where are those amino acids coming from? And most of the compounding pharmacies in Dubai get them from China. And so because they're cheaper, right? And that doesn't mean China's bad. It just means China sometimes the purity isn't always perfect. And then you have to have third-party testing to validate that, which compounding pharmacies generally don't do. So the company that I work with, Peptual, the reason I work with them too and the reason I use their products is because they sequence all their peptides in the US. So all the raw ingredients are sourced in the US, not from China. Because a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll order the peptides, they'll order the raw ingredients from China, and then they'll bottle them in the US and they'll say made in US. But that's kind of misleading. But the reason, and our peptides are more expensive if people check it out. But the reason they're more expensive is because manufacturing in the US is just more expensive. And then we also do third-party testing, which not everyone does.
Okay. You just, you touched on the perfect point of people just ordering from online and, using the peptide without understanding. But there are, then you're playing with your body without understanding what it's going to do, because you just have read maybe ChatGPT, asked ChatGPT what I need to take, and you just, done that. But as a practitioner, don't you think that's an alarming thing and people should stop it in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think experimenting on yourself with peptides is not as benign as people think. For example, there was a study where they did random audits of these peptides, and 8% of those peptides had something called endotoxin in it, which is like a bacterial contaminant. So, and that bacterial contaminant can cause immune reactions, and there's been people even hospitalized and things like that. So peptides can have real risk with them, and that's why knowing the sourcing is so important. The sourcing and the quality control and the standardization of how they're made is going to be what's going to dictate if they're going to be safe and also how effective they'll be. So that's really what it comes down to. I think if you're going to do them, you do them through a proper company that does the third-party testing and everything, and that has a network of providers, right? That's the way that Peptides company does it. And there's other companies doing that too, but I think that's the right way to do it. Not just like order and hope for the best.
And then inject it yourself and pray to God that everything works.
Yeah.
Okay. Doctor, again, you spoke about, peptides being expensive and then, of course, different variations. But is longevity for the rich, or is it something that even regular people should look and can consider?
What's going to impact your longevity the most is free. Exercising, lifting weights, doing the zone 2 cardio, building up your VO2 max, sleeping properly, stress reduction, the mindfulness meditation, the meaning purpose, the community stuff, the light, right? Like making sure you get the light in the morning, and even infrared light therapy, right? Can be very helpful. And there's a lot of talk now about light deficiency and the air we breathe and the quality of that, and removing those toxins if we can. And so there's all these very simple low-hanging fruits that you can just do. And for the most part, they're free, right? Maybe a gym membership costs a little bit of money, but it's not overly expensive, I think. And now with everything, with the apps and with the intelligent training systems out there, there's a lot of things you can do at home too. And you don't need to train and kill yourself. You just need to do like a minimum effective dose, where sometimes just like 15 minutes, 3 times a week can be enough to maintain or even put on muscle, right? So there's research on that. And so I think people overcomplicate things sometimes, and they want to make it seem like longevity is this thing just for the elite. But that stuff has the most evidence behind it, right? And has definitive research saying that if you exercise, you eat lots of different colored vegetables, Mediterranean type of diet, and olive oil and etc., then you're probably going to live longer, right? There's so much research on that, so that's hard to dispute. And whereas on the other hand, you have more of these, let's say, cutting edge technologies and therapies which don't have that definitive mortality data, but they have early mechanistic data and early promising signs. And that stuff is very expensive because it's new technology, but it's also still not as definitive as the foundational things. So yes, like for example, I do the stem cells on myself because I think they will help me potentially live a healthier, longer life. But that's also because I've done all the basic stuff, and and if you have the means to do them, then why not, right? But not everyone does. And that stuff is still very much for the small percentage of the population. But with any new technology, there's always going to be economies of scale, innovation in manufacturing, and the cost will come down. So right now it's expensive, but in the next 5 years, it'll probably come down by like a factor of like 5, I would say. And then maybe in 10 years, but factor of 10, you know what I mean?
Okay. Tell us about your routine. How does your day look like?
Well, my life is all over the place because I travel a lot.
Yeah.
So when I'm in a routine, which is not often because I travel so much, but if I'm in one place for a few months, which, you know, I've been to Dubai for the last 2 months, which has been nice to not travel for a bit.
Yeah.
But usually I'm traveling almost every month. So then it always disrupts your routine, right? I'm hoping to have less travel in the future. But at least if I'm in one place, then yeah, I mean, you know, the foundational things like we talked about, I try to practice what I preach, which is like in the morning, you wake up, first thing in the morning, try to get sunlight exposure, and, you know, the reason being because it kind of resets your circadian clock and tells your body to get ready and wake up, and you know, and suppress that melatonin. And also doing a 10-minute like in the morning like gratitude type of thing, and, you know, visualizing your goals and just like things like that, right?
Yeah.
Where it just helped to build a good practice of how you want your day to go. And then you know, I think a lot of people, first thing they do in the morning is they go for a coffee, but that's not the best thing. You should probably drink a lot of water.
Yeah.
and then, you know, caffeine's a whole topic, but like in my view on caffeine is that it's a tool that you can use to potentially, you know, improve performance or improve focus, but it's not something you should necessarily rely on and abuse as well, which is, it's probably the most abused drug in the world, maybe after alcohol, I don't know, but caffeine, because of its widespread use, people take it on a daily basis, and they don't realize their receptors, same problem, right? They start adapting, meaning they upregulate, and your body essentially doesn't have the same response to the caffeine it did when you first took it. So you need to always take a break so you can reset those receptors. So give yourself like 5 to 7 day break every once in a while to let your receptors reset. And so I do have caffeine sometimes, but mainly on days I work out, because I use it as a performance aid.
Like a pre-workout.
Yeah, pre-workout, exactly. Not as I need this to function or else I can't get through my day, because that's a problem. I think if you have that usually suggests you have some sort of mitochondrial dysfunction, and you should do a test called Me Screen, which is a really cool test to look at mitochondrial health, and then you can figure out and optimize your mitochondria, because they give you recommendations based off that. So you know, and then essentially for me, a lot of it, I try to train 4 or 5 days a week, and I'm doing mainly resistance training, and it's strength training to build muscle and making sure I get 1 gram of pound per body weight. Muscle is an organ of longevity, right? It's basically a reservoir for positive signals for your body to decrease your risk of chronic diseases. And it's also resiliency. When you have more muscle, it gives your body more capability to bounce back from illness, or less likely to be threatened by severe illness, as we saw in COVID, right? People who had more muscle were less likely to die from COVID, and people who were, you know, obese metabolically had more risk. So that's been shown over and over. So I think putting on muscle needs to be a priority for many people, especially women. And for whatever reason, there's still this myth that women think that they're going to get too muscular, which is just like it's so hard to put on muscle, even for men. Like I've been training naturally for over 15 years, and I look pretty normal. You know, I'm not like the, you know, I mean, maybe I'm not the most genetically blessed, but still, it's not like you explode and become gigantic, right? Even if you're a man, you have to train very hard and regularly. And it's because of the bodybuilding anabolic steroid community. A lot of people think they're going to become this monster, but that's just not what happens. And I think doing that with obviously like the kind of cardiovascular training, I think the most efficient way to do cardiovascular training is intervals personally. I mean, there's research on that too. Again, it's time as well, right? Like if you have maybe more time, you can do, you know, zone 2 steady state cardio. But I think for a lot of people who like me are busy, just doing intervals, like doing like, you know, 3 to 4 minutes of high intense intervals, and then rest for a similar amount of time, and just do that a couple of times a week. That's going to give you a lot of similar benefits to increase your VO2 max. So those are like the basic things. And then I think I do infrared light therapy pretty much every day, mainly because it can help, you know, with sleep, and it can help your skin, and it has benefits that are, I think, more widespread than just cosmetic. We're realizing now, you know, for mitochondrial health, and just your body, for whatever reason, maybe because of evolution, it seems to really like infrared light and different light wavelengths. Like there's green light, blue light. There's a lot of light therapy being studied now, which is really interesting. So that's pretty much my routine.
Okay. Any supplements that you take on an everyday basis?
Yes, I take omega-3 on a regular basis because I don't eat fish enough. If you eat salmon, you know, twice a week, is probably fine. I take collagen peptides on a daily basis, 15 to 20 grams, because Again, unless you eat like bone broth every day, it's going to be hard for you to get enough of the collagen.
Yeah.
Creatine I take as well, 5 to 10 grams a day. And there's some really good companies now making like creatine where they have what's called GAA, which is a precursor to creatine, crosses the blood-brain barrier as well. So it's good for brain health. And then those are some of the foundational supplements, and then like whey protein. And I'm also the supplement I really like that I think a lot of people maybe don't know about is there's one called L-ergothioneine.
Yeah.
It's basically a selective antioxidant. So obviously a lot of people have heard of like resveratrol or, vitamin E, vitamin C. These are antioxidants, but they're actually not that effective. And maybe some of them like vitamin E, maybe not even, there might be some risk with it. But this one, because your body has a specific receptor for it, and there's a lot of research suggesting it's very safe, and it's quite effective too for helping with that oxidative stress that happens as a byproduct of energy metabolism.
Yeah.
So I really like that supplement. And there's a supplement called glycine, which is a glutathione precursor.
Okay.
Because glutathione is a master antioxidant in your body.
Yep.
But the problem is when you take glutathione, it doesn't actually increase your intracellular levels. So meaning it's not actually making your body produce more. And then that glutathione doesn't actually go into the cells, so it doesn't really do much.
Okay.
So you need something to make your own cells produce more. And that's what glycine does. It's a trademark supplement, but it's owned by some company in the US. But basically, it's a precursor to glutathione. And so it makes your own cells produce more. And they have research showing and supporting that. So I think those are pretty much my daily supplements. Yeah.
Probably completely diverting out, but, just think about intermittent fasting. I'm a big fan of intermittent fasting. I mean, for me, my regular life is 16/8, plus I end up doing 72 hours on a bi-weekly basis. So, but I know a lot of, and I kind of in my coaching practice as well, I do recommend including intermittent fasting as part of your lifestyle. But there are a lot of people who aren't able to do the fasting. Why is that?
For some women, it can be in that 16-hour window just ends up causing, headaches or other issues. And I think there probably is a genetic component to it too. I don't know the gene off the top of my head, but I think for some people there may be something there as well, where it's like, genetically their bodies do better with fasting and other people don't. So I think there's just some individual variation with that. And in general, men tend to do better than women with fasting. And that has been shown, in research as well as like anecdotally, you see that too. So, but I think the benefits of fasting are certainly there, but again, there's risks with it too, right? So the risk being that you don't get enough protein and you lose muscle, right? So that you just have to be mindful of those things.
So in the eating window, you're actually prioritizing your protein.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. We had some very interesting conversation. We move into some fun segment. I call it hot seat, cold truths.
Okay.
Yeah?
Okay.
So
like fun.
whatever comes to your head, rapid fire kind of a thing, just some fun stuff. Biohacking, revolution in health, or just very expensive hobbies for rich people?
That's a difficult question. It is a revolution in health if approached with the right type of scientific approach and not the experimentation and just trying expensive things without evidence.
Okay. Peptides, miracle medicine or misunderstood science?
I think they're miracle medicine.
Longevity obsession. Are we trying to live longer or just afraid of aging?
I think people are afraid of aging in the sense that they're afraid of losing to have the ability to do the things that they love and to not live a high quality of life as they get older.
One longevity habit you think people should start today?
Gratitude. It's a simple one and it has effects. Kindness as well. It's another simple one. Doesn't cost you anything and it's good for you.
Yeah. One longevity trend you think is complete nonsense?
Complete nonsense. Probably, I would say IVNAD. It's not complete nonsense, but it's overhyped. Okay. Like it doesn't work for many people and you have to do your genetics to figure out if it's actually going to work for you. And then you have to, because some people are poor methylators and the NAD doesn't absorb properly. So,
yeah. Okay. Cold plunges, science or social media flex?
No, there's good enough science on it, and it can certainly have a positive effect for some people, especially who have lots of inflammation in their body.
Okay. If you had to pick only one for health optimization, what would it be? Sleep, nutrition, or exercise?
Sleep, because if your sleep is disordered and you're not getting that deep sleep, there's nothing more important than that.
Yeah.
Sleep is the time where your body gets rid of the trash, so to speak,
Yeah.
and recycles, right?
Yeah.
In the cerebral spinal fluid, as research has shown. And then it's a time for repair and regeneration,
Yeah.
right? And that's
like
what this
all
whole
our hormones are produced at that
Yes.
time. Yeah.
So it outweighs everything. So if your sleep is distorted, you're metabolically more dysfunctional. Your hormones get dysregulated. You're more likely to overeat. You're more likely to produce more cortisol. Your immune system is more suppressed. You're more risk of infections. So many issues, and you can't mask it with exercise and nutrition. Doesn't matter
True.
how much you do if you're not sleeping properly.
Correct.
Yeah.
True. One supplement almost everyone is wasting money on.
Most people take a multivitamin. I don't know if most people do, but a lot of people take a multivitamin, and most of them don't do much. And especially the ones like Centrum or like the ones that are popular, unfortunately. I think if you want to do a proper multivitamin now, there are personalized ones that use your genetics and blood work. Like there's a company called Bionic.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then there's other companies out there now too doing similar things. Yeah.
Okay. One supplement most people should consider.
Creatine, for sure. It should be in the water at this point. If everyone should be consuming it on a daily basis.
What's one thing celebrities do for their health that actually makes sense?
Well, I'm biased, but I think stem cells. That's why a lot of celebrities come to me.
Yeah.
But because there's good science behind it, and there's a lot of research, and again, it's the right type of stem cells. Yeah.
Okay. If you could give one piece of advice to someone who wants to age well, what would it be?
Don't take life too seriously and have fun.
Oh, fantastic. I think it's a great one. Thank you. I mean, very good answers there. Doctor, this kind of leads me to my last segment of the podcast. It's called the 1%. 99% of my podcast is all about women wellness in general, but men are a part of our lives too. Mm-hmm. So you've given them the 1%. Yeah. So what is your 1% advice to the men in our lives? What can men do better to support women?
I think a lot of men, at least to support women, can just need to have more understanding that our physiology is different, right? And that means the men and women are inherently, there's differences, and you have to understand those differences so that you can be understanding of each other, right? And so if you're like, oh, she acts this way and I act this way, why is she acting like that? And but it's because there might be differences that you have to accept and understand. So I think having more empathy and compassion, I guess, would be probably the big thing for men.
Men, are you listening?
Yeah.
Doctor, any parting advice for our listeners, especially ones that are maybe wanting to understand more on peptides or whatever? What is your parting advice to them?
I think all this new cutting edge medicine really comes down to sourcing. And we've talked about that throughout the podcast. But whether you're doing stem cells or peptides or any of these more cutting edge therapies, you have to make sure that the source that you're getting them from is rigorously validated and to study thoroughly in terms of third-party testing, and then also done by someone who has a lot of experience, because these are relatively new things. And if they don't have a lot of clinical experience, they may not know how to do it in the safe and most effective way.
Okay. And for the people who really want to understand more, how can they connect with you? And if they want to come and see you?
Well, we have a clinic here in Dubai, and we have clinics in the US now, in Florida. We have one in Toronto, Canada, which is where I'm from, and we have one in Cabo. So the easiest way is just my Instagram at dr.akhan, A-K-H-A-N. I'm pretty active on there. I don't check everything, but I try to get back to people. And then we have a website, eterna.health, like eternal without an L, .health. And that's our company where we have clinics around the world.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Adeel. It was fantastic having this conversation, especially about a complicated subject, which you made it super simple for us. So thanks a lot for joining me on the podcast today.
Yes, thank you for having me. I know it's a lot of information, but hopefully it's somewhat digestible.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And to everyone listening, if you enjoyed this podcast and want more conversations around menopause, midlife, and women's health, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and share it with someone who would benefit from this conversation. I'm Gayu Lewis, and this is the Gayu Lewis Podcast. And until next time, menopause, why pause? Let's play.